Changing clothes. She told me years later she'd watch me changing, peeling off the layers and methodical through the wooden slats of the closet, revealing pale, thin limbs, spattered with dark moles, before pulling on a royal blue swimsuit. Behind thinly framed glasses, she must have felt something daring, something new, while I tossed my used clothes onto the dresser, chattering to the empty room around me, and her on the other side of the door. How many times we changed together in our rooms back to back and promising not to look. Winters, at her house, I'd glance in the mirror and over my shoulder to watch the prickling warmth return to the backs of her legs as she leaned forward, one hand on the desk to deal with stubborn woolen socks. My own ruddy cheeks, already windburnt, would never tell her anything new, anything daring, and instead, we'd pull on dry clothes, retreat down the stairs, and into the clean snow. Canadian author Anne Carson refers to adjectives as latches of being. A simple enough phrase, but what implications come with latching a person's essence or nature to particularity? Identity politics come to mind: queer, straight, black, mixed, disabled, white, foreign, Jewish. Those in minority groups certainly know the weight of the latches, the shackles that come with being identified in a particular way. What are colors if not a type of adjective, just another binding description? There have been instances in the past, however, where color has operated as a tool for the oppressed. The reductive categorization that has paved the way for colonialism and other forms of oppression, such as homophobia and sexism, has also been reclaimed by those in minority groups and used as a way to latch onto one another, as a way of coping with the enormity of existence. Adjectives also have the ability to offer us the chance as individuals to find an escape from the inevitable alienation of living. One example might be the handkerchief code, popular amongst American gay men in the 1970s. Displayed via bandanas worn in their back pockets, they devised a system that used color to discreetly represent and reveal different sexual preferences. For these men, color served as a tool to find others to connect with, to be able to engage in activities that were otherwise punishable by law. We mostly stay in now. The lesbian bar down the street closed, and when I tried to explain it to your parents, they got confused between the lesbian bar down the street, the oldest lesbian bar in Amsterdam, and the oldest gay bar in Amsterdam. I'm still not sure why I told them about it. We mostly stay in now, and I tell myself it's 'cause the bars shut down, but it's also 'cause our neighbors, two staring men slurping candlelit wine every night, yelled at us. Opening the window, he screamed into the bright street about putting our trash out, and when we stared back, mouths gaping, the other shot his head out like a rattlesnake. "Don't look at my boyfriend like that, bitch." And now I'm always getting into fights with men. Like the cab driver who slammed his horn at us when we were biking side by side down the road, a little drunk, so you spat on his car and he jerked the wheel, jammed the brakes, opened the door, spitting at me in a language I couldn't understand. I said, "You're driving a fucking minivan. I will fight you." And I would have, still would. Maybe if he punched me, I would have reason to be as angry as everyone tells me I am. At least I would have something to show for it. Evidence in bluey and yellow and purple marks. The lesbian bar down the street closed, and we've stayed home ever since. On the last night, you asked the bartender what was coming in. A seafood bar. "Oh well," you said, "at least people will still be eating fish here." She smiled politely. The bar is closed, and we haven't had sex in 3 months, and I wonder if that means anything. I can't let it, but I still can't sleep, thinking about it sometimes. Medusa, the notorious monstrous woman from the Greek myth of Perseus, was known for turning men into stone. With a head of snakes and venomous eyes, she was untouchable. But this was not always the case. As a young woman, she was known for her beauty and turned many suitors away. Poseidon, god of the sea, grew envious and forced himself upon her in the temple of Athena. Angry at the desecration of her temple, Athena then punished Medusa by turning her into the creature she is known to be. But this curse could also, in some sense, be a blessing. The power was now in Medusa's hands. She would never be pursued by unwanted suitors again, rendered far more terrifying than attractive. Terror, however, would only work so well to keep the men at bay, as she would continue to be pursued by Perseus, by Freud, by all the men aghast at the existence of a woman more powerful. As French writer and philosopher Hélène Cixous says, isn't this fear convenient for them? Would the worst be, isn't the worst in truth, that women aren't castrated, that they have only to stop listening to the sirens, for the sirens were men, for history to change its meaning? Cixous takes the side of the monstrous, of Medusa, and tries reading her in a different light. Medusa's monstrosity becomes a rendering constructed by men, and the ability to disarm what has been written of her persists. As Cixous says, you only have to look at the Medusa straight on to see her, and she's not deadly, she's beautiful, and she's laughing. 2 pigeons. My downstairs neighbors gutted their place, stripped it until our floor shook, vitamin bottles dancing off the shelves. Large men appeared in the weird alley through bedroom and bathroom windows to breathe smoke, call girlfriends, yelling into cell phones on lunch breaks. I couldn't focus or fuck my girlfriend or myself with their big voices echoing, so I fixed a thick blanket to the window, drowned the room in smudgy light. A couple weeks after they left, 2 pigeons arrived in a flurry, and we watched together, one of them convulsing on the shit-smeared nest, the other nearby, ready to puke in the gray newborn's mouth. Iron particles in their beaks keep pigeons aligned towards north, built-in compasses pulling them from place to place rather than memory. When my mom visits later that month, brings books left behind, I find an old postcard from you between the pages, and remember you always homesick as a child, something I never was. I worked for some time in a giant Starbucks, the one in Rembrandt Plain, and it was a real pain in the ass. I remember there was this one old American guy who would come in often, nearly every day, who really grated on my nerves. He was the type of customer who would saunter up and say, "I'll have my regular," with the exact change already picked out of his linty pocket, ready to dump onto the counter. He would sit for hours reading through all the newspapers stacked next to the brown armchair to the left of the automatic doors. The doors often remained open from the steady stream of people, so it was inevitable that along with the tourists often would come a pigeon or 2. They would wander around the massive cafe, nibbling on the muffin crumbs, bobbing around, dodging clumsy feet, going mostly undetected until someone would come up and say, "Did you know there's a pigeon in here?" At which point we'd be forced to acknowledge it and make some effort to appear as though we were dealing with it. No one ever really wanted to be in charge of herding the flighty thing out. One day in particular, the same pigeon kept wandering in, and no matter what we did, we could not convince the brazen bird to leave. I was ducked down under the counter, restocking endless napkin dispensers, when I heard a shuffling and a collective dramatic gasp. The pigeon had finally been caught underneath a large paper bag, and swiftly, before anyone could move a muscle, the old American guy who had been inching forward, greedily eyeing the final capture, stamped his foot down on the bag, hard. We all stared, not quite knowing what to say, while a flustered British woman at the register demanded a refund of her money, having suddenly lost her appetite. Thank you.